as I've looked at our itinerary, which I've done on a number of occasions since we started talking about this, I've always wanted to spend overnight in Assisi. Everyone who has done that has told me, because Assisi can be very crowded, because so many people come throughout the year. It doesn't matter. I've been there in the summer, I've been there in the fall, I've been there in the dead of winter, November, December. And even when it's raining and overcast, the city is just beautifully filled with lots of pilgrims. But then it empties out overnight. Everyone gets on their buses, returns to either back to Rome or wherever they are going, and all of a sudden the city has what one person described to me as what must have been for St. Francis, that the beautiful silence that gave him an opportunity to listen to the voice of God.
Love that.
And it's a walled city, and so there are very few traditional walled cities left. There is Assisi. I know Siena is still a walled city. I've never had a chance to go to Trent. I understand Trent is still a walled city. So we'll have a sense of this beautiful city literally on a hill, walls around it to defend and protect itself, and then we'll have, in a sense, kind of the city to ourselves. The evening, obviously not truly, but from what I understand, it will feel like that. So I'm very excited to be able to spend a few. We're there
3 nights.
We're there
3 nights.
Yes.
Yep.
That's right.
So we get there, folks, and we take the bus from Rome to Assisi right away. And the first thing we do, the only thing we do the first day, because we're recovering from jet lag or bus lag, if the case may be, we have Mass at the Hermitage at Carceri. I don't know much about that, but Hermitage, Assisi, Holy Mass, I'm in.
Yeah, I don't know much about that either. It'll be good for us, though, to begin with Holy Mass. Probably try to keep everybody up. You know, when you're on pilgrimage, the nice thing about that first day is just kind of getting there, not totally relaxing, not totally sleeping, trying to get caught up, because it's hard to get caught up with jet lag. The best thing to cure jet lag when you get there is keep going. And then we'll kind of probably have an early evening and begin ourselves. Because if you try to wait till you catch up, in truth, you never really catch up.
This is a good tip, and you can impart this to all the pilgrims who will be with us.
I will do that. So if you're worried about I don't sleep well, or I'm worried about how I'm going to, don't worry about that. We're going to take care of you completely and totally. And again, the nice thing about a pilgrimage, and especially the schedule that we've placed, and that's what I love it, there is enough leisure time, not downtime, leisure time. And again, it may seem like we're quabbling or scribbling over words, but it's not just kind of time away from the group, if you will. So we might spend time away from each other, but we're still on pilgrimage. So even if we're just enjoying coffee in one of the beautiful piazzas, which we'll have when we're in Assisi or when we're in Florence, which is it's a toss-up between Rome and Florence as to which is my favorite city in the whole world. And because Florence, and we'll get there in a minute, I know I'm jumping ahead, but Florence is a beautiful walking city, not in the same way that Venice is, but not the amount of traffic that you'll encounter in Rome. Rome is very much like what we're used to in big cities, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, in terms of traffic. Florence also is a big city, but a walking city.
Nice.
So there are cars, but pedestrians rule the city, which is a wonderful way to be able to see it. It's not the type of place where you're busing it everywhere you get out and you walk. So we will have some time to just sit and relax, under the Duomo, which we'll talk about. To be at a cafe in the shadow of the Duomo in the baptistry, and all the history that's gone on there since the beginning, the late 1200s.
Wow.
There's been a prayer site there dedicated to that building for almost over 700 years. I'll come back to that thought in a minute. So,
okay, let's talk about Assisi, then we'll get to Florence.
All right, yes, I'm jumping ahead of ourselves, excuse me.
So after we have Mass at the Hermitage at Carceri, we go to sleep, and then the next morning we look around Assisi, and we see where St. Francis of Assisi lived and spent his life. Remember the famous story about how God said, Francis, rebuild my church.
Yes.
And he thought he meant the physical church.
Exactly.
But he meant his church.
And he did both, actually, in truth. So not fully understanding the import of what the Lord was asking him to do. So the beautiful thing about Assisi, of course, is it is indeed set on a hill. The Portinuncleo, the very church that he did rebuild, is now in the heart of the Basilica, which is down the hill from the city of Assisi itself. But there also is the beautiful Basilica of San Francesco, St. Francis of Assisi. It is cared for by both the Capuchins and the conventuals, and I think maybe the friars regular. So they all share in the custody of caring for the tomb of St. Francis, and it's a beautiful church.
Yeah, when I looked at the image of it, it's large.
It is large. It's deceptively large, because oftentimes you'll see pictures of it mostly from the front, if you will, kind of approaching it, and then you have to actually kind of do a panoramic, if you will, to look at the side and behind, and then you realize how large it is. Both the upper church, which of course maybe about a decade ago suffered some rather intense damage because of earthquake, but they have worked beautifully to And again, the Romans have this wonderful facility with antiques and the preservation of, because of course it's a living museum. All of Italy is just a living museum. So you can't do anything without being aware of the possibility of encountering history of, and so they have a beautiful way of restoring things. So there's the upper church, there's a crypt church where St. Francis is himself, and then as you make your way into the city proper and up the hill, I know we're also going to spend some time at the tomb of St. Clair.
St. Clair, yes. And her body is pretty much incorrupt, yes?
That is correct, which is one of the signs of sanctity and holiness. So we'll have a chance to spend time there. Her chapel is much smaller in some ways and kind of gives you a sense of both Francis and Clare obviously sought to live a life of intense poverty. And there is an austerity to even what remains, if you will, for the area where we'll encounter St. Clare's tomb and the area around there. But then there's a beautiful kind of vista of the city when you're standing up by her church, by her basilica. And then beyond there, if you're very adventurous, I've only done it a couple of times. My knees don't hold up like they used to, so I have to space out my walking. There's a beautiful, like, small place of prayer that apparently St. Clare would go to as well that they've preserved. So
wow.
It'll be a beautiful full day. And of course, there are wonderful opportunities along the way for opportunities to buy. One of my favorite images is the arm of our Lord. So it is a common Franciscan image because Francis was the first one to receive the stigmata.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful image of Francis with his arms around the body of our Lord, and our Lord's right arm has come off the cross and it's around the shoulder of St. Francis.
Wow.
It's a beautiful image. And so there are just some wonderful things we're going to experience. And the nice thing about it is, then I'll be quiet because I've just, all these memories are kind of flooding back to me.
I can tell.
One of the things that will happen is, even with the numbers of people present, there is kind of a beautiful, I won't call it a silence, but an appropriate calmness, if you will, when people are there. So it doesn't have the feel of being in a stadium or at a concert or something like that. Not that those are bad things, but you know, with all of these people, you would anticipate kind of a din of noise. You can hear people, but there is a respect for, especially in the basilicas themselves, but even as people are moving from one to another, even as people are shopping, there's a graciousness. And I think it's really born of this place of profound peace, and it just kind of seeps into your bones.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
so to be in the footsteps of these great, great saints, the founder of the Franciscan order, the founder of the Poor Clares,
Yes.
St. Clare, of course. I don't know if I'll get there, but I can aspire to it. There may not be an order of the poor Zips any daytime soon, but, you know.
There are a whole bunch of us who are poor Zips. So.
Right. So the next day, after we leave Assisi, we take a bus to Florence, and that's the town you were talking about. The first place we go to is Santa Croce, where
Yes.
Michelangelo and Galileo are buried.
That is exactly correct. They are buried there.
Amazing.
Pardon me, I've got a little something in my eye, excuse me. It looks very similar. So the architects of both the Santa Croce, our Lord's Sacred Heart, and then the Duomo, which is traditionally known as, which is the Basilica, the heart of the city of Florence itself, and the Florentines, a wonderfully proud people with a great history. Florence and the Medicis, just some wonderful history there. Both share that kind of iconic facades of that beautiful brickwork that is particular to that area of Italy, of I guess part of Tuscany. And it's actually quite beautiful. There's some wonderful history in Santa Croce, which is nice that we're actually starting there, because everyone, when you get, oftentimes you take a train, it lets you off at one of my favorite churches in the whole world, a little tiny church called Santa Maria Novella, which is a beautiful image of our crucified Lord. You come to the train station kind of in the heart, hustle and bustle, you cross into there, and everyone immediately makes their way to the Duomo and the baptistry. So it's crowded. And it can be a little bit overwhelming, a little bit daunting, because it is a walking city. So many people are trying to get into the cathedral. But to start at Santa Croce will pull us a little bit outside of the city itself. And so we'll actually have a chance to kind of just simply kind of, in a sense, begin the pilgrimage without kind of the intensity of lots of people kind of pushing us through, if you will.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. So we see those beautiful churches in Florence, then we take the bus back to Assisi. So we're in Assisi 3 nights, which is nice because you don't have to keep packing up your bags every
Yes.
night and all that stuff. And then the next day, we head to the Amalfi Coast. But along the way, we stop in Orvieto, where the miracle that originated in Bolsena took place where the priest was doubting the presence of the Lord, and the host in his hands while he said Mass began to bleed over his hands and onto the corporal on the altar. What an amazing miracle.
You can see the corporal, which of course we'll have an opportunity to see. You can also see actually the stone where the blood of our Lord fell. You can see some of the drops of the blood of our Lord. And this is one of the first Eucharistic miracles in the life of the church. And it's an extremely profound experience. Orvieto itself is a city, again, on a hill, beautifully, just beautifully set on the hill itself. I love that image of these cities set on a hill, so the light and the truth of Christ truly radiating. So it's Florence, and then we were in Assisi, now we're in Orvieto. But then to be in the presence where there was a Eucharistic miracle. Of course, as Catholic men and women, we believe in the power of our Eucharistic Lord. We believe in his real presence. We're not searching for affirmation, but in his generosity, his love, his mercy, for this priest particularly, but for all of us, the Lord provides yet further affirmation to bolster and strengthen our faith. And this is one of the things about pilgrimage. So we'll be able to spend time there and pray there, not just kind of get in, see it, get a little history, and leave. We'll be able to spend some time there. So if you're overwhelmed, if you cry, which everyone will discover, I cry a lot when I go to these places. I get slightly overwhelmed by the power of them. It's okay, because you're there to encounter God. You're there to allow the Lord to not only bring you fellowship with each other as we pilgrim together, as we journey together, but actually also allow the Lord to touch your heart. And again, it's the Easter season where the Lord is constantly going to be calling you. Do you believe?
Yes.
Do you accept what has happened? Do you understand what's happened? And so here we are where there's a Eucharistic miracle, yet affirming us in our risen Lord, our resurrected Lord, who remains present to us, body, blood, soul, and divinity. All of this fits together so perfectly. It's overwhelming, isn't it?
It's going to be tremendous.
It is going to be tremendous. I'm sorry.
No, in all the history, I was studying this up. Pope Urban IV, 1 year after that miracle, initiated the Feast of Corpus Christi, which continues to this day.
Yes.
And 700 years later, the Pope in 1964 went back to the Cathedral of Orvieto, where we're going to be, to commemorate the birth of the Feast of Corpus Christi. So it's just so much history to consider.
And again, the beauty of the church, and in a sense, of course, St. Thomas Aquinas, beautifully, intimately connected with the Feast of Corpus Christi, writing all of those beautiful Eucharistic hymns, and he himself just caught up every time he celebrated the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. And that's, again, that other aspect of pilgrimage, because for us, these are not sites of history. These are alive for us. One of the things that a friend of mine said to me that I wasn't even really aware of, every time I go on pilgrimage, I would always say, I'm going to pray for you, and then I'm going to go visit. For example, we're going to talk about this in Rome. One of my favorite churches is La Chiesa Nuova, which is the burial place of St. Philip Neri. I'm going to go spend some time with my friend Philip Neri. He said, you talk about them in the first person. I go, because they're alive to me. They're alive to me. I know they're dead physically. We know that. But we also know the bonds of death do not keep because of what our Lord has done. Again, where? During the Easter season. We're celebrating the reality that shatters the bond, or shatters that which separates us one from another. And so, yes, these men and women we encounter, these holy men and women who've gone before us, all of this history for us is very much alive. It isn't just contained and ossified in a book. And so we're going to see a place where there's Eucharistic miracle, but we're also going to celebrate that same miracle. That's going to bind and hold us together every single day. So it isn't just that we're looking at something that happened, we're involved in something that continues to unfold.
Yes. Incredible.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing to be at Orvieto at that cathedral.
I'm excited.
And celebrate that.
I kind of want to get through Lent right now. Normally I don't even want to rush through Lent, but I'm kind of about ready to get to April. The year's just starting.
To get to this pilgrimage, that's right.
Yes, let's go. I'm ready to go. So.
Okay, so after we do all of that in Orvieto and experience all of that, the depth of that in Orvieto, we make it down to the Amalfi Coast, one of the most beautiful places in the world. We'll be at Sorrento, which is on the east side of the Amalfi Coast. Beautiful place. I've looked at the pictures, haven't been there, but oh my goodness, it's the city built into the hills there, built in right by the Bay of Naples, overlooking the water. It's going to be a beautiful place to stay for 2 nights. We're going to be there for 2 nights.
Coast, I have been to Naples. Naples is a little chaotic. The Amalfi Coast is a slice of heaven in the midst of kind of the chaos. The Neapolitans pride themselves on kind of being enthusiastic, even for some of them maybe being slightly just a level of energy even beyond what we'll encounter in Rome. They love that. But I think in part it's because of the beauty. And the Amalfi Coast is so wonderful. And so I don't want to pull away from some of the beautiful spiritual realities, but when we'll also, to go back to Orvieto just for a minute, is some beautiful wines that you can then bring down with you and spend some time with those wines on the Amalfi Coast. The weather's going to be perfect. It's a beautiful time of the year to be in Italy.
Springtime.
It won't be overly hot. It'll be pleasant enough to enjoy the weather outside. So yeah, it'll be a beautiful, a nice kind of a respite. I think we have some time built in
We
just
do.
for leisure.
In Sorrento.
Yes.
We have dinner Saturday night in Sorrento. Then Sunday's a day of rest. We'll, of course, have Holy Mass. But there's an optional side trip. You can just kick around Sorrento, which is not bad.
No.
If you're, 4 or 5 days into the pilgrimage, you need a little time to kick back, spend time with the other pilgrims, with your fellow travelers. Great. You got that opportunity in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yes.
Now, if you're a little more adventurous, there's a side trip to the Isle of Capri. You take a hydrofoil there. I had to ask somebody, what's a hydrofoil? I thought it was one of those little jet skis or something.
No.
But no, right? What's a hydrofoil?
It's a boat of some sort.
Yes, that's what he told me, a boat.
But it looks like a kind of a pontoon boat. It's like a big tire underneath, I think. So,
Right.
yeah.
It's not a long trip to the island.
No, it's not. So don't worry. There's no danger there. But yeah, I've not been to the Isle of Capri. I hear it's beautiful.
Yep, it's supposed to be one of the most beautiful islands in the world. They've
Yes.
got the blue grotto where the water's all incredibly blue. They've got San Clemente there. San Michel, I'm sorry. Beautiful church, I understand.
Yes.
And so you can spend some time in the island and then come back, or you can just stay in Sorrento, which is beautiful.
And again, I just to kind of to help people understand the beauty of a day of leisure in between, because I was making that distinction. So it isn't just kind of you get to kind of just go off on your own or go with a couple of people. You can do that, but again, you're still with each other. And even if we're not physically with each other, we certainly will have begun our day in prayer. We'll keep each other in thought. We're not just kind of scattering to the wind. So especially at this point, having been together 4 or 5 days, we'll know each other well.
Yes.
When you're with each other in
Right.
that proximity for that period of time, you do get to know each other well.
But isn't that one of the great things
Yes,
about
it
pilgrimage, the people you meet and
Yes,
the
very much
relationships
so.
of devout people looking to grow in holiness as we all supposedly will be, and it's just a great opportunity to spend time with people, like-minded people.
And it is, and I've heard this from many people. Most of my pilgrimages have been with seminarians, have been a little bit smaller, but being on larger pilgrimages where they have become very close to the people that they were on the pilgrimage, and they continue to, 15, 20 years hence, either travel with them or keep in contact with them. So
Sure.
again, that's just one of those other aspects of the beauty of what it is that we'll be accomplishing when we're together.
Well, after Sunday in Sorrento, we get on a boat, a larger boat, and we all go around the Amalfi Coast to Positano, which is one of the most picturesque places in the world, built right into the mountain there, overlooking the water. And there's a famous church at the bottom of the city, which usually the church is at the top.
Right.
This is down at the bottom, and it's I'm trying to look at the name of it. It's I can find it here. It's Santa Maria Assunta in Positano.
Okay.
So
Which
that'll be.
and I've never been to Positano, so it's Our Lady of the Assumption, and I'm sure it'll be gorgeous. There isn't an ugly church anywhere in Italy from top to bottom, so you don't have to worry about that. So to say it's beautiful may not actually say anything at all, since they're all so thoroughly gorgeous. But with the picturesque backdrop that is Positano, and then again these beautiful churches dedicated to Our Lady, just what a wonderful way to make our way eventually to my favorite city. We're getting there.
After Positano,
We're
that's
getting
where
there.
we're headed.
We're getting there. I know.
We're going back north to Rome, and we will be there for 4 nights.
I'm so excited. I can't tell you how excited I am. It's wonderful what you kind of associate, but there is always a wonderful smell that I associate with the city, no matter what time of day I arrive in the city. And it'll be a long time since I've arrived actually by any other conveyance other than a plane. Normally I'm flying into the city. But to come then, are we on train or are we on boat at that point? We're on train.
We're on bus.
We're on a bus all the way up. Okay. So we'll have...
I should say an air-conditioned deluxe motor coach.
Yes,
to
I think
make
it's
it
good.
more accurate.
That's right, and I think it's good for people to know that. So, when you just come into the city, and again, it is a major city, so it has all of those aspects. But then you're also stepping into literally probably 3,000 years, maybe even longer than that, 4,000 years of history.
Wow.
It's absolutely incredible.
The eternal city.
Exactly, which was for the longest time the center of the world. And it's interesting to call ourselves Roman Catholics does mean something. Not just our connectedness to the city of Rome, but we know, of course, part of that is, the large part of that, maybe even the lion's share of that, is because that's where Peter and Paul are. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Peter, obviously, at St. Peter's Basilica, and Paul at St. Paul's outside the walls. 2 of the major basilicas that we'll encounter on the trip, which is absolutely wonderful. And but it also says something about the genius, if you will, of the Roman people and their ability to bring that peace that was present when our Lord was born. You know, that wonderful, I think it's in Matthew, so there was peace over the whole world. Well, part of that, it was in large measure the work of the Father and the Spirit to make sure that the birth of the Son was experienced, in a sense, in the best possible way. But at that moment in history, everything kind of conspired to make it perfect for the unfolding and the transformation of history itself. And then we come into this city that was literally overtaken. I mean, we brought down the Roman Empire. It took us a couple hundred years, but we brought it down.
Right.
And then ultimately not brought it down. I would say we elevated and brought it up. But we transformed it slowly.
Catholic
but
Church.
surely. Indeed. And we're going to be able to experience and talk about. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to start there?
Well, St. Paul outside the walls, you mentioned that, the
Yes.
second biggest church in Rome. I've
Yes.
been there. It is spectacular. It holds thousands of people.
It does.
And just so ancient. So they have all those rows of the
Images of
images
the Pope,
of the
yes.
popes all around on both sides of the church, and it's just incredible to see.
And it's hard for people to conceive when you hear St. Paul's outside the walls. They're actually anticipating it is outside the walls. And in truth, it actually is. So we'll have an experience of a walled city when we're in Assisi, which will help give people a point of reference to what that would have looked like. It was common to wall the city, especially if you were kind of an outpost. And of course, Rome toward the end or through its transformation was dealing with, visitors or invaders, depending on how you look at your history from the east. And so you built walls for protection, you built walls for defense, you built walls as lines of demarcation between this property and that property, or as the city grew. So the thing about Rome is that there are a series of walls that reflect the growth of the city. When St. Paul's was built, it was literally outside the walls. But the thing about it even now, and while we won't do that on this pilgrimage, it's one of my favorite things to do. It's a long walk, but I've made that walk many times. I'll walk out, celebrate Mass, spend time in prayer, do my Holy Hour, do my rosary, and kind of walk back. It's a whole day, but it's great. So it now is in the care of the Benedictines. Our Holy Father Emeritus, Benedict XVI, asked them to take custody of the major basilica in order to encourage more pilgrims to go. Oftentimes, people don't make their way out there because it is so far outside the city, so it's hard for them to get there. We'll have an opportunity for confession. Of course, we'll see the relics of St. Paul himself,
Beautiful.
the apostle to the Gentiles,
Wow.
the
Yes.
one who makes it possible for us to be here.
Yes.
We'll have a chance to see him. So
Who wrote all those parts of the New Testament.
that
Yes.
indeed, incredible. Yes.
I should point out that we're not going to be walking all day as you did when
No.
you were a younger man.
No,
so
no,
don't
not at
worry,
all.
folks. If you don't want to walk all day, we're not going to be walking all day. Hey, we should say that while you're watching live on Facebook and YouTube, if you have questions about anything we're talking about or any questions you have about this pilgrimage, feel free to type them in and we will answer those questions when we get not tired of, but we get done talking about the eternal city.
Indeed, which may or may not happen. We'll see what happens. Since it is eternal, there's obviously a lot of things we can talk about. So
That's right.
We'll try to truncate that a little bit. So
Let's talk about St. Mary Major, another of the famous churches in Rome. We're going to be there.
We are going to be there. So there are four major basilica. There is Santa Maria Maggiore, Mary Major, St. Paul's outside the walls,
Is St. Peter's Basilica
St. Peter's
one?
Basilica. And then why am I not thinking of the fourth one? I'm losing my mind here.
That was
Oh,
four.
St. John Lateran.
St. John Lateran.
Which is actually the Holy Father's
Parish.
his cathedral. That's
His
actually
cathedral.
his church.
Right.
We'll talk about that history now and later, or we'll do both. But Santa Maria Maggiore is known for having a relic of the manger. It
Wow.
is one of the first churches in the West dedicated to our Blessed Mother, Saint Mary Major. It's almost a stone's throw, if you will. Not really, but just a little bit longer between St. Mary Major and St. John Lateran. And I was just talking about St. John
Right.
Lateran, which is the church, which is actually the cathedral. Are we
Of the
going
Pope. No.
We're not going there.
I don't think we're going there.
Okay.
But you can run over there. It's close by, right?
It is very close. I was going to say it's very close by, and we'll have some downtime as well.
Right,
So if
right.
you want to do that, so you can
can take
complete
that
your, it's an easy walk to get there.
Aren't there something like 300 churches in
I
Rome
believe
or
there
something
are
like
300
that?
churches. You can. I don't think you can exhaust them. And I've seen having lived there. I lived there for 2 years when I was a student priest, studying at Sant'Anselmo, which is which is not one of the original 7 hills of Rome. I had the custom of a couple of days a week of trying to find a new church and walk to a new church, and I don't think I put a dent in the 2 years I was there of the churches that are present in Rome. So we'll be at St. Mary Major,
Yes.
and then eventually we make our way.
Well, we've got St. Pudienza Santa Pudienza, and we've got Santa Procida,
beautiful.
a 9th century church, 1,300 years old. Can you imagine a church built 1,300 years ago?
It's hard for us as Americans because we're so new.
Yes.
It's
Babes.
hard for, we are, we really are. And to think about something that's been there for 1,300 years is absolutely incredible. And so if for no other reason, just simply to be in a place with that degree of antiquity attached to it. Of course, again, the Romans do a beautiful job of just caretaking and really being beautiful custodians of all of these great treasures so that we can come and not only enjoy them, but allow them to continue to be places of prayer.
Yep. And the nice thing is we're going to be there for 4 nights, so we're not going to be rushed. It's not going to be, okay, you see this place in 5 minutes, get back on the tour, coach.
Right.
No, it's going to be, no, we're going to go slow. So after we see all of those things we just talked about and more, the next day we have the papal audience, we see St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican Museum, the Sistine Chapel, things you've heard about, folks, if you haven't been there all of your life, and we're going to be in each and every one of them.
That is a beautiful full day. It truly is. To begin with the papal audience, to have a chance to eventually make our way into St. Peter's Basilica. One of the things I always like to draw people's attention to is the contrast. I don't believe it now is the largest church in Christendom. At one time it was. But one of the beautiful things about it, you don't feel like you're in a cavernous building or a cavernous place of prayer because the statuary is larger than life. That was the genius of Michelangelo, was to make everything larger than it actually was. So it actually felt proportionate to the size itself.
And that's one thing that struck me. When I went to St. Peter's Basilica, I had this image. I thought there'd be a lot of life-size sculptures, but as you say, they're bigger, literally bigger than life.
They are bigger than life, but then you don't feel as, they're huge, but you're in a space that's huge. There's that grade, you probably remember this from your visits, on the floor. It shows you where all the other large basilicas around the world actually
would fit in.
So if you've been to Westminster, you've been to St. Peter's, or St. Patrick's in New York, if you've been to
the Cathedral Basilica in St. Louis.
It will show you on the floor where they all actually will fit into this just phenomenal. I literally cannot say enough. One of my customs was every Saturday morning I would get up early, and priests have the opportunity of celebrating Mass at one of the side altars. And so you can, and people can come for Mass, just pick a language and go. And that was my custom, just by myself every Saturday morning, would go and celebrate Mass and then just spend some time in prayer. It's a beautiful place. It's just a phenomenal. I never tire of it.
Beautiful.
Never tire of it. And then, of course, the Vatican Museum, which, of course, the history is untold. They're both secular and sacred history, from all of the Egyptian history that's there, from the Hall of Tapestries, to the art and the frescoes themselves, and of course the Sistine Chapel, which no matter how many times you see it and how many variants you see it, whether it's a large crowd or I actually was able to experience it for the very first time over 20 plus years ago before they started work on it, its restoration, in a way that I was actually able to lie on the floor and take pictures.
Whoa.
That's how empty it actually was. Yeah.
How beautiful.
Yeah, you can't do that now. You can't even take pictures now. And so I didn't realize as a very young man, this was 25 plus years ago, that what a great opportunity that would actually be, but to be in the Sistine Chapel. And then just, again, to be in St. Peter's Square in the Piazza.
Just incredible.
If the Pope's schedule, if he's there, to be able to see
we
the
may see
concerts
him
as well. Exactly.
Yep. Michelangelo, I heard he was a sculptor, and the Pope talked him into painting.
That's
he wasn't
correct.
a painter to begin with,
not.
right? And
Yeah,
yet,
they had a tumultuous relationship. Both of them very strong-willed, Julius and Michelangelo. But
and that's part of the beauty of this trip, because we'll hear these stories that
will.
you don't know, right?
And we'll see the fruit of that wonderful relationship.
Yes.
Despite their friction, what Michelangelo created is actually, it's breathtaking. It's breathtaking.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the next day we go to ancient Rome, and we see some tremendous places there in ancient Rome. Santa Maria Araceli, I think that's how you say it, in San Clemente.
That's correct. Santa Maria Araceli is this beautiful church of Our Lady of the Heavens. One of the things about this church is a series of rather intense steps. There are other ways to get there, so don't worry about it. If it looks daunting, you don't have to go up the steps, but there is, that's part of the pilgrimage. I believe we're celebrating Holy Mass there, I think.
I think so,
if
yes.
I remember that correctly. And of course, San Clemente. By tradition, San Clemente is one of the first places.
Not Richard Nixon.
No.
San Clemente,
San
California.
Clemente, correctly.
This is Italy. We're in Italy, not California.
San Clemente. Yes, the one after one in California was named. I believe the tradition is that's where one of the places that St. Peter first arrived when he came to Rome. He eventually would have made his way to another church called Santa Maria in Trastevere, which is kind of more the Greek Jewish quarter, but he was in San Clemente. San Clemente also is a church that has 3 different levels to it, reflecting its original kind of early church history, kind of its early Middle Age history, and then of course the age of the Renaissance and Baroque period as well. So it's a wonderful, and it's kind of a hidden gem because a lot of people don't actually go there. It sits kind of in the shadow of the Colosseum and the Forum, and so to be in ancient Rome, to see the Colosseum, see the Forum.
We're going to see those.
We are going to see those, and then have this beautiful side trip into San Clemente. It sits in a neighborhood, kind of off the beaten path.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So many things we're going to see in Rome, and then we're going to enjoy the Piazza Navona, of course, and have some gelato, and it's just an incredible, incredible city that we will never forget.
No, and I apologize. The thing that whether you've been once or whether you've been 1,000 times, you'll have a sense, especially when we get to Rome, every single time we turn the corner, we're going to discover something. There's going to be a piece of history, something alive that can speak to our faith, you know. So, you know, whatever your particular personality is, whatever saint you relate to, you will find someone in Rome to speak with and converse with and to spend some time with, whether it's Augustine or Monica, my buddy Philip Neri. When you're in Rome itself, of course, St. John Paul II is there, St. John the 23rd, St. Ignatius of Loyola is there, the arm of St. Francis Xavier. So, I mean, the list is endless, you know, the places where there were conversions, and I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. So
we're going to see where Peter and Paul were imprisoned and where they lived and all this stuff.
Yeah,
so while they're there,
it's incredible, absolutely incredible.
So anyway, we have some questions coming in. I should say, though, too, folks, if you're worried about what the feel of this trip is going to be, Canterbury Pilgrimage is setting up in 4-star hotels all along the way. Breakfast and dinner is included every day, so you don't need a lot of pocket cash. Buy lunch, but that's okay. Sometimes you want to run off, buy lunch somewhere with a few friends along the pilgrimage, so it's a good thing there. But everything's going to be taken care of, folks, as we see these holy, holy places and draw closer to the Lord. I see we have some questions coming in from people watching us around the world on Facebook and YouTube, the miracle of modern technology.
I know, it's incredible.
Here's a question. What is the purpose of a pilgrimage? Now, you touched on that earlier, but could you expound on that for us?
So we, as people, have gone on pilgrimages for, I guess, for as long as people have had movements from one place to another. But a pilgrimage is going to a holy site because of either something that happened there or someone who lived there, and you go there because you want to be a part of what that place means to you. So pilgrimages aren't particular to us as Catholics, but it is something that has been a part of our history from the very beginning. Actually, the building of St. Peter's Basilica was in part a result of people coming as pilgrims to the Holy City to pray at the place where St. Peter was martyred. Of course, at the very beginning of the first 300 years of the life of the church, it was a secret, only known to other Catholics that they passed on because the church was persecuted in those first 300 years. As the church continued to grow, as she was able to experience her freedom, churches were built where holy sites were, so people would come there. And of course, I believe the first holy year was in the 1300s. I believe it was one of the urbans called a holy year for pilgrims to come to Rome, to go through the holy doors. There are indulgences attached to going through the holy doors, which we just had in the year 2000. Prayers for the Pope, confession, Holy Communion. But you go on pilgrimage in order to go to these holy sites to strengthen your faith, to renew your faith, to increase your zeal, and then to be a part of something that is much larger than yourself.
That's a great reason to go on a pilgrimage. Mary Ellen from Seattle wants to know, what made you pick these specific locations? Well, we should give a tip of the cap to Canterbury Pilgrimages, who has been there and they lined up all these things. But to hear you talk about, you've been to Assisi, you've been to Florence, you've been to Rome, seems like they did a great job in arranging this trip.
They did. I mean, there are some pieces to it that if I were putting together, I wouldn't have thought of, and I'm glad we did, because they are off the beaten path, and I think that will add a richness to, these are, in one sense, the perennial places to go. Certainly Rome. I'm always amazed if someone tells me I've been to Italy, I've never been to Rome. I'm like, really? Okay. I get it, but you got to go to Rome. And of course, Florence and Assisi. But it's nice actually not to be staying in Assisi, or staying in Florence, but actually staying in Assisi. That's a nice touch. Because Florence is beautiful. It's nice to stay there. But to be, again, with the solitude and the quiet and the silence of Assisi will be beautiful. But then to go to Positano, and to go have a chance to be on the Amalfi Coast and have a little bit of leisure in there. And again, the way it moves is nice. To begin in Rome, but to immediately make our way first to Assisi, then to Florence, then to Sorrento, part of Positano, make our way back up to Rome, and then make our way home. It's a nice little, it is a nice little just pilgrimage journey. So.
Beautiful. Let's see some of the other questions coming in. Will you get an opportunity to walk around St. Peter's Square? Most certainly.
And the answer is definitely. So most of that day, and this is not a tradition, but normally how it happens, after the audience and of course the Vatican Museum tour normally lets you out toward the, at the very kind of top of the steps leading into the Basilica of St. Peter proper. And so as we come out of that, there'll be a chance just to kind of take pictures in the piazza, to stand in the obelisk. We've got some good history about the building and the moving of that obelisk, how it got there. I'm not going to give all my stories right now. I want to share.
Save some.
I want to save some. I want to hold back a little bit. So, but yet the short answer is yes. We'll have a wonderful opportunity just to kind of walk around and see the piazza.
And when I first got there, and I think this will be the experience for a lot of first-time pilgrims, is when you get to St. Peter's Square, your mind just goes to those scenes you've seen so many times on EWTN with the canonization of saints,
right,
and the papal people, the Pope there, and the huge hundreds of thousands of people. You can imagine what that looks like. You'll be standing right there.
And it's incredible because no matter how we approach it, so whether we're on foot or we're on a bus or we're dropped off somewhere, the way you approach coming into St. Peter's Basilica is no one ever does, even if you come in on the sides, everyone automatically goes to the middle, goes to the obelisk, stands around the obelisk, to look back down the Via della Conciliazione, and then to look forward to the facade of St. Peter, which of course is known. So whether you're a first-time pilgrim and you'll be overwhelmed, or like me, every single time I go there, I'm still overwhelmed by that. I never tire, no matter how I come around. And a lot of times I'll find myself talking and yakking, and all of a sudden I come around the corner, and there's St. Peter's. And the person I'm talking with, we just both stop. Whether we've been there 1,000 times, we just stop for a moment. It's absolutely incredible.
Brian in St. Louis wants to know, is there a minimum age for people to be able to go on this pilgrimage? You know, I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to check with Canterbury Pilgrimages. I don't know.
I don't know either. It never crossed my mind.
We'll get the answer for that, and that's the beauty of Facebook and
Yes.
YouTube. We will type that answer back to you, Brian, and you will have that answer pronto. Another question, besides St. Clare herself, will we get to see any other incorruptible saints? I don't know.
I would say yes, insofar as the opportunity in the various places will present themselves.
Aside from you and me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes.
You, maybe.
No, I was going to say you, maybe, not me. Okay, so we're just going to leave that alone for a minute. So I want to say yes, insofar as, again, the places where we'll be visiting, the opportunities are there. To know which specific ones, I'd have to do a little bit more research.
Gotcha. Another question just coming in. What can we expect to get out of this pilgrimage? I think you talked brilliantly about that before, but I mean, there's so much this 11-day experience will be if you go on this trip.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get out of it, certainly, first and foremost, just an opportunity to be in these holy places and have an opportunity for us to have our faith strengthened and bolstered. You'll meet new people, or maybe strengthen relationships with people that you know if you're going with friends or family. You'll have a chance for leisure. You'll be able to spend some downtime in some beautiful places. And then one of the other things that I love about visiting Italy, especially the place we're going to go, and I already know of 2 or 3 restaurants I'm going to go to, is the food is absolutely fabulous. You're not going to have a bad meal. Now, I always warn people, whatever you're used to as what you just know as Italian food, wherever you may come from, because I know this is going all over the world, actually, is it not?
Yes.
So you might be coming from not just
Iceland.
Yes, so you may not. It isn't what you're used to in terms of Italian, if you will, unless you're actually Italian yourself and you're cooking it the way it's cooked in the old country. I've never had a bad meal, from the fancy restaurants to going into a shop and getting a slice of pizza to even the places that you know are explicitly touristy. And you can tell those immediately because they've got a guy out there kind of give you a menu and tell you to come in and eat. So you know that. Even those places, the food is absolutely phenomenal. And so you'll have all of that. You'll have a chance to have some gelato. I'll stay away from the gelato because I'm trying to cut down the midsection.
That's not a diet food, gelato.
It is not a diet food. That is correct. So, and I want to make
But
sure
it's
my
good.
boss, it is. So, I think that, and then really. Beyond that, who knows in terms of what God's going to say to you. I mean,
Yes.
I've had so many powerful experiences in places where I've prayed, where God has chosen that moment to give me an insight or speak to me. So I can almost guarantee the things I've articulated. And then since I can't speak to what God is capable of doing, since he's beyond me, who knows what he can do with it.
If you go on this pilgrimage with the intention to get closer to God, I think the Lord's going to come through and you are going to accomplish what you hope to see.
It's exactly correct.
Let's see, we have another question. Can you tell us a little more about the altar and the center of the Basilica in St. Peter's?
We can. So
That's probably where you see that on EWTN, right?
You do.
The Mass
and one
and
of
the
the things
altar.
that's, and our tour guide will do this, and I will certainly stress this, but one of the passages from both Matthew and Luke's Gospel, Matthew's Gospel especially, Peter, you are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. When you go to St. Peter's and you take the tour of the scavi, the excavations underneath, we discovered this definitively during the reign of Pius XII, that under the current altar of St. Peter are where the bones of St. Peter actually are.
Wow.
So not only is Peter obviously the foundation upon which the whole church is built spiritually, literally, St. Peter's Basilica, while not technically the mother church, because that belongs to St. John Lateran, is the church with which most people around the world are familiar. And of course the Pope of Malosia, the Pope from his room when he gives the speech, or the Sunday audience. So the altar, if you were to be able to look down, you're standing right in, you're praying over the bones of St. Peter.
Wow.
It sits in the middle of the church, and the church, and we'll talk a little bit about this history, when it was first built, was in kind of a more truncated Byzantine style. Church in the middle with four kind of arms of equal length. And then over time, as it went through various architects, the back part, that long nave now, that aisle that is kept expanding, is the longest part, if you will, of the church itself. And so it's a little bit different in terms of when people think about the history of the church and celebrating Mass ad orientem and things of that nature, what all that would have happened. But it still is, and that's the place where the Holy Father celebrates Mass. No one else can be there unless he gives them permission to actually celebrate Mass there.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Folks, I think we're just about out of time. We want to thank you for tuning in. Now, the cost of this trip is $32.95, not $32.95.
Right.
But this is 11 days, 4-star hotels, breakfast and dinner included every day. The motor coach, the air conditioning, everything's going to be beautiful. Well, this is a very well-priced trip, folks. Well worth the money. It'll be an unforgettable experience. Now, for $999, you get optional airfare from St. Louis, from Chicago, from New York. If you're listening from another city, it's very possible the Canterbury Pilgrimages can match that very reasonable round-trip air too. So just go to the website of Canterbury Pilgrimages or the website of matermedia.org, and you'll find all the details and be able to join us on this fantastic pilgrimage. Monsignor, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. It's
Look
great.
forward to being with you for
I'm
those
excited.
11 days.
Yes, God bless you. Thank
It's
you.
gonna
God
be
bless
great.
everyone. Thank you.
Yes, God bless you all.